From the Roman Empire to Brexit, everything is complicated. The United Kingdom is an island nation off the coast of Europe's northwest. London, the nation's capital, is one of the top cities for business, finance, and culture in the globe. The UK has significantly influenced the global economy, particularly in the fields of manufacturing and technology. However, since the end of World War II, cultural products like literature, theatre, cinema, television, and popular music that have drawn from all regions of the nation have become the UK's most notable exports. However, many Britons were somewhat hesitant to join the EU, adhering to the views of the legendary wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who mentioned, "We see nothing but good and hope in a richer, freer, more contended European commonality. But we have our own dream and our own task. We are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not comprised. We are interested and associated, but not absorbed." In fact, in a vote on whether the United Kingdom should stay in the EU in June 2016, 52% of British voters preferred to leave. And here the story begins. Let's go back in history, knocking on the door as an odd European partner. After World War II, the US made the strategic decision to support Western Europe's security through its foreign policy. It did this as a consequence of a changed power dynamic. In a nutshell, the war changed Europe from being at the centre of world affairs to a factor in an emerging power balance that included the US and the Soviet Union. While the UK chose not to become a member of the European Community Security Council, ECSC, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg were happy to do so. That result was produced by a confluence of events inside the British government. In affluent circles, there was a widespread conviction that Britain would lose its position as the world's preeminent power if it joined European institutions. Along with this lovely feeling, there was a conviction that Britain's proper function was to act as a link between Europe and the US and between Europe and the Commonwealth, a role that it could only fulfill by opposing European unity. Thus, when 6 European nations took the first step towards union, this shiny, amazing country, Britain, remained on the sideline. These same 6 nations made the decision to form the European Economic Community, EEC, a few years later, between 1955 and 1957. This was a pledge to develop a single market where commodities, services, people, and money could flow freely. This marked the beginning of what is known as the European Union. The intention was to increase commerce and economic expansion. One more time, don't get bored. In 1957, this shiny, amazing Britain remained silent, primarily because of its place in the world that prevented it from being overly dependent on the continent for its economic success. Can't we say it in simpler words? Yes, sure. Here we go. There are frequently regulations on what can enter a country. For instance, you would have to pay a tariff to Britain if you wanted to manufacture a car in France and send it there. Or suppose you were French and desired to reside and earn a living in Britain. To do so legally, you would have to go through a protracted immigration procedure. There are several nations in Western Europe, and each has its own trade, immigration, and economic policies. Making an effort to follow these guidelines was quite ineffective. What if every nation was subject to the same rules? That is essentially where the European Union got its start. What if every barrier disappeared and the EU took such action? In order to combine their economic regulations, nearly all of the Western European nations joined the organisation in 1993. They achieved this by enabling unrestricted trade in products, services, capital, and people among its member nations. Long stretches of economic success have been aided by the EU, and the area has remained peaceful as a result. Challenges to cooperation that led to Brexit. Brexit, which stands for British exit, is the term used to describe the procedure through which the United Kingdom, UK, left the European Union. On June 23, 2016, UK voters cast ballots in a referendum to decide whether to stay in the EU or leave it, which marked the start of the Brexit process. With 51.9% of the vote, the Leave movement narrowly prevailed. On March 29, 2017, the UK government invoked Article 50 of the Treaty on the European Union following the vote. In addition to establishing a 2-year time limit for discussions with the EU, this formally started the departure process. Let's take some steps backwards. Why did it happen? There are difficulties in collaborating. When something awful occurs, everyone is impacted. The EU was attractive. Yes, you are right to think it. Mainly, it is because it made it simpler for European nations to benefit from one another's wealth. Cooperation, like any partnership, includes working through tough times together, but that hasn't always been simple. Consider the financial crisis of 2008. According to a majority of analysts, the European Central Bank's inability to act decisively caused a recession that was far worse than it needed to be. Both unemployment and tax income decreased, banks needed bailouts, and debt in some EU nations skyrocketed. Some people had second thoughts about joining the EU after seeing it in such a turmoil, and rich nations, including the UK, became more concerned that they could eventually have to contribute to bailing out less developed nations. That's it? Of course not. After the EU was founded, some British people didn't like how many foreigners were flocking to Britain. Citizens of one nation may now move to another considerably more easy thanks to the new European Union. And after joining, the number of people born outside of the country surged. Two primary forces, in the opinion of experts, are responsible for this trend. First, in the middle of the 2000s, the EU expanded to include post-communist nations, and the inhabitants of those nations were impoverished. Many of its inhabitants emigrated to richer nations. Second, particularly hard hit by the 2008 market meltdown were numerous European nations. People from such nations travelled to other nations, including the United Kingdom, in search of employment when they couldn't find one at home. Economic response to Brexit. Despite Britain's formal exit from the EU, 2020 served as a transition and implementation year. There wasn't much that seemed different to people in the UK on a daily basis throughout that time, because trade and customs remained. Oh, the vote to exit the EU still had considerable impact on the British economy. Due to a decline in corporate investment, the country's GDP growth dropped to about 1.7% in 2018 from 2.2% in 2016 and 2.4% in 2017. The country's GDP was expected to expand by 1.3% in 2019 and 1.4% in 2020, according to the IMF. The growth rate was instead 1.6% in 2019, but minus 11% in 2020. However, the GDP recovered, reaching 7.6% in 2021 before edging down to 4.1% in 2022. In the 3 months to January 2019, the unemployment rate in the UK fell to a 44-year low of 3.9%. This, according to experts, is a result of firms favouring employee retention over making significant new project investments. Hold on, we might have a winner here. Exporters. Yes, as you just heard. Exporters benefited from the decline in the value of the pound following the Brexit decision, but consumers were forced to pay more for imports, which had a big influence on the annual inflation rate. In the 12 months before November 2017, CPI inflation reached 3.1%, a nearly 6-year high that far beyond the Bank of England's 2% objective. With the drop in oil and gas prices in 2018, inflation decreased. However, following the worldwide pandemic, inflation shot up, increasing 8.7% in the year before April 2023. Can anything soften the blow? Actually, it'll be really nasty if there isn't some sort of agreement that lessens the damage and allows Britain to continue to benefit from at least some of the European Union cooperation it previously cherished. Impact on the EU and the US. The EU has only existed for 25 years. Yeah, still very young. The modern integration of Europe is just 60 years old. The uniqueness of the UK's interaction with Europe is rooted in its own history. Yet it is impossible to conceal the crucial role that the UK has played within Europe over the last 3 centuries. For the continent, the UK has long been a crucial commercial and innovation partner. Many people have drawn inspiration from the UK while developing their own rights, laws, and policies. The UK served as a stabilising force in the 18th and 19th century's security and subsequently served as a vital European nation in the 20th century struggle against militarism and totalitarianism. Over many years, American businesses from a wide range of industries have made large investments in the UK. In reality, since 2000, American firms have benefited 9% of the world's foreign affiliate profit from the UK. Additionally, the US employs many Britons, making American businesses one of the biggest employers in the UK. In 2021, US affiliates production in the United Kingdom reached $129.3 billion. Through its advances in assets under management, AUM, foreign sales, and research and development (R&D), this shiny British economy is a key component of corporate America's worldwide infrastructure. American businesses have always seen Britain as a crucial entry point into other EU nations. Many businesses that are strategically aligned with the UK may find their affiliate profits and stock values threatened by Brexit, which may cause them to rethink their business dealings with the UK and EU members. Credit risk may harm American businesses and investors that deal with European banks and credit markets. Depending on how the leave goes, European banks may need to replace $123 billion in securities. Furthermore, the absence of UK debt from European banks' emergency cash buffers might result in liquidity issues. Since 2007, European asset-backed securities have been declining. Sadly, given that Britain has decided to leave, this downturn is probably going to get worse. Conclusion: who will leave the EU next? There were political disputes over the EU outside of Britain. Even after Britain left the EU, the majority of its members had potent anti-European groups that, despite their struggles to gain national power, had a significant impact on how each country's politics were concluded in the years that followed. There is a potential that these movements may lead to future EU membership referendums in a few nations. A study by the international research organisation IPSOS, published in May 2016, revealed that the majority of respondents in Italy and France said their nations should conduct a vote on EU membership.